Well, let's see if this camera's actually worth $5,100. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a real-world review of the Sony RX1R III compact point-and-shoot, whatever you want to call it, camera. Now, this is an interesting camera because it's been roughly 10 years since the R2 version of this came out, and Sony has made some updates, and they've also taken some things out of this camera as well. But why did they decide to put it out now after roughly 10 years? Now, we know that a lot of Sony fanboys and fan people have been clamoring for this small camera. They loved what the old version did, but we know that Fuji and Leica all have different point and shoots out that are in the uber expensive range. Now, I call this uber expensive, and we're not gonna bury the lead here. This is a $5,100 camera, not including extra accessories. I think it's important to mention that up front because a lot of this review is gonna be skewed because of the price of this camera. Now, I took this camera out into the real world around the studio through Fishtown to try and get some nice photos outside, just walking around using it as that street style camera that you kind of take everywhere because that's how they market this. But I also took it to a Phillies game, not so much to shoot the Phillies, but to do on-field stuff before the game, to do those candids right there, and to also take it around the stands and try to find the images around there because as an everyday carry camera, as it's being sold as and promoted as, well, you should be able to shoot just about anything with it. Now, speaking of shooting anything with it, let's get this out of the way real quick. We already know that the image quality is going to be superb. The reason we know it's going to be superb is because the innards of this camera are basically the same as the Sony a7CR as well as the a7R III. You have the same sensors and you have the same processors, which equals basically the same quality. There is no question in my mind that the quality of this 61 megapixel sensor is incredible, but we still come back to that price time and time again, and that will be a recurring theme throughout this video. Now, before moving to the outside of this camera and the rest of the review, we do have a side-by-side comparison where I help you decide between this new camera or the Sony a7CR because they are very similar, and we have a video that helps you figure that out. Now, let's get into the outside of the body and see what's changed, if anything. So first things first, they did change some of the design of the body. The top plate is now completely flat where before it wasn't, but there isn't a ton that they changed in terms of the design and the sexiness of it. Now, they had a chance to make it sexy. The Fuji is sexy. I have a Fuji X100 III right here. This so happens to be Steven's. This is kind of a sexy camera. They did something unique and different, and it looks pretty good, and people like the look and the sexiness of it. They had a chance to make their camera sexy. Now, in fact, I think the a7CR is more sexy, especially if you get it in silver. Now, just a side note, this is actually the a7C2 because we didn't have an a7CR to throw up here, but it's the exact same body. So just understand that the R1 says R on the front, this one doesn't. It's the same exact body. So this camera lacks that sexiness, and it's kind of weird after a decade they couldn't have made it more sexy, kind of like myself, because I've gotten more sexy as time has gone on. Now, from a grip standpoint, they have this rubber here that I guess you can kind of grab on, but your fingers hang off the bottom. It doesn't feel super secure. It comes with a neck strap, which I personally feel is the wrong strap it should come with. I really think this is a wrist strap style camera. You just slip it onto your wrist and you're good to go. I don't think this needs to hang around your neck, but again, fashion statements, people might buy this to say, look, I spent $5,100. I'm super cool. Look at me, and have it hang around their neck. So it does not feel as good in the hands as the a7CR, which is slightly better because of the grip that it has. Now, on the front, we know that we have a built-in 35mm f2 lens. This is a Zeiss lens. It is the same lens that we've seen in the second version of this camera and the first version as well. This lens does not come off. It is paired with this body. So you are stuck with this 35mm f2 lens for the entirety of owning this system. Now, is it a good lens? I'm sure it was better 10 years ago when it came out, but there's a lot that changes in 10 years. Now, in terms of image quality, I'm not upset with any of the images that I got. The quality looks fine to me, but I would absolutely think that a lot has changed in 10 years, and an updated lens on the front of this might have been a better choice than going with a retread lens that they used already in the past. Let me jump in here real quick because I want to show you our custom Lightroom presets in action on this cute dog right here, starting with Blue's Clues, followed by Brooklyn. We've got C41, Copper Tone, which looks awesome, DeLorean, High C, Kaleidoscope, Mel Brooks, Saltwater Taffy, Thick, Tintype, and Wet Hot American Summer. And my all-time favorite from FroPak 1, with one click, we've got Skittles, and it goes boom. But all new and exclusive to FroPak 4, we have 4 custom adaptive Lightroom presets called Face Enhance, Full Body Skin Enhance, Eye Only Enhance, and Background Blur. So look, if you want to speed up your raw workflow, give yourself a great starting point, or you're just tired of other people's presets sucking, as you can see, our presets do not suck. That's why we created 14 all-new custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at fronosphoto.com/FroPak4. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. Or if you want to get the Grand Slam bundle that includes FroPak 1, 2, 3, and 4, and of course my favorite Skittles, you can save even more. Now, let's get back to the video. Now here's something that did change. You now have an EVF already on the back of the camera. You don't have to pop it up out of the camera, which was kind of a cool feature. That was sexy. Having a button that you press and you're like, ooh, an EVF pops out of the camera? That was cool. Now, was it a little clunky? Sure. It didn't allow you to put your face, where it goes now. It was kind of awkward to hold, but that pop-up thing was awesome. Now it's on the back of the camera. The screen has changed. It is now flush to the back of the camera. It does not flip out and rotate like you have on the a7CR, and it doesn't flip down or up like it did on the version 2 of this, and I don't understand why you would take that out. Obviously, they want to go smaller, so maybe putting the mechanism in there to have it tilt or do that is something they had to choose between to make it stay smaller, but that is not something that I personally would have done. A lot of people want to be able to flip down and get lower angles and be able to just look down at the screen low on the ground. That is much more difficult to do here because it's flush to the back of the camera. For example, if you're photographing at the baseball game or with kids down at a low angle, you kind of want to have that flip out screen so you can hold it down low. Thankfully, in this case, I was recording my electronic viewfinder, so I had a big screen that I could flip flat on the top of the camera and put it down on the ground to get me those low angles. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't have gotten the images as low as I was able to get them. Now, another change they have here is to the battery. They were able to update it to a new battery, and by new, I technically mean old. This is the W series battery that is half the millihour amps as the Z battery that just about everybody has, since they have any of the A7s or the A7R cameras. They have a better battery. One of the reasons they went with this slightly bigger battery is obviously the old battery wasn't as good, but the downside to this is it doesn't have as much power. I rather see you put in a bigger grip which fits the bigger battery so that I can shoot for longer. So that right there is a fail. In fact, after shooting the baseball game, and not even the entire baseball game, I was down to 12%. That is not acceptable. Now, since I just mentioned battery power, yes, I could carry around a USB-C power bank for my phone, which then plugs into here because you can charge it up through there. It also doesn't come with a charger anymore. You just charge everything in the camera through USB-C. As I mentioned earlier, you have that 61 megapixel full frame BSI sensor that is absolutely incredible. No questions asked, hand down, one of the best on the market. That's incredible that they were able to squeeze that into such a small body. They also squeezed in the Bionz XR as well as the AI processor, which gives you the latest and greatest in autofocus. But isn't it questionable to say latest and greatest in autofocus when you have a lens that was, originally put on a camera 13 years ago? Because I could feel and hear the autofocus working. I can't feel or hear the autofocus working in any of the modern Sony lenses. Now, that's not to say that the autofocus didn't do its job and didn't work and wasn't good with tracking subjects. It's just that it's older tech, and this is a $5,100 body. You would expect it to get the best of the best with honors, sir. This is what it sounds like. So you don't have the traditional mechanical shutter in this camera. What you do have is a leaf shutter, which is in the lens. Now that's good if you want to shoot flash and you can get a maximum of 1/2000th of a second flash sync, but this isn't exactly the camera you're using to do studio portraits, because 35mm is generally not the portrait lens you think of when you think of studio flash and studio portraits. But the max shutter speed you get with the mechanical shutter is 1/2000th of a second at f2. This is an f2 lens, and that is wide open. Now, the issue there is what happens on a bright day when you're out at the baseball game and you're trying to photograph a subject and you need more shutter speed. Well, the only way to compensate for that is to turn your aperture up to cut back on the amount of light coming in, which is not what I want to do when I own an f2 lens. I want to shoot at f2 because I own, and you spent $5,100. You want to be able to do it. The other options that you have is you can go to 1/4000th of a second at 5.6 with the mechanical shutter, but again, you're going to 5.6. That defeats the whole purpose of being able to shoot at f2. The other thing that you can do is go into electronic shutter mode, which maxes out at 1/8000th of a second, which is fine when it's static subjects, but if it becomes moving subjects or you're panning with something, you are going to get a lot of rolling shutter. For example, when we're looking at the LED boards here of Nick Castellanos coming out of the dugout, you get the scan lines of the LED boards are going to be more prevalent because it is a slow reading sensor. Let me cut in here real quick and let you know that this video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're looking to build your very own online portfolio, or you'd like to sell some stuff on an online store, use what I've been using for almost 15 years for my personal site at jaredpolin.com, because it's simple, easy, affordable, and I don't need to know coding. And yeah, I can sell prints right there, super easy. To get your 14-day free trial, head on over to squarespace.com/FronosPhoto. If you decide that it's for you, use the code FronosPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Now, let's get back to the video. What they needed to do was put an ND filter in this camera. Why, for $5,100, can we not have an ND filter, but Fuji can have an ND filter with a press of a button? I get it that the sensor is super close to the lens here and there may not be room in there, but usability-wise, make it happen. $5,100. I want everything for $5,100, including a ND filter built in. Speaking of one press of the button, I had to map out a button on the camera to allow me to bring up the option to go from mechanical to electronic, where, for example, Fuji will automatically choose between mechanical or electronic based off of the shutter speed that you're using. Now, in terms of frames per second, you can get 5 frames per second with the mechanical shutter and 5 frames per second with the electronic shutter. You can do more than that with the a7CR, so keep that in mind when you're thinking about this camera. Another thing this camera does not have is any sort of image stabilization. You don't have IBIS in the body to stabilize anything, and you don't have image stabilization in the lens. That is another fail. Why? Because with an a7CR, you can choose any lens that you want. That also has image stabilization, and the lens that you choose to put on it can have image stabilization as well. $5,100, and we don't have any form of stabilization when it comes to stills. Case in point, we have fans in the concourse moving to their seats, and yeah, they're blurry at a super slow shutter speed because that's what you want. You want to convey the movement, but the ground should be sharp because the ground is not moving. Or in the example with this photo, we have Harry Callis, the statue. He should be nice and sharp, and the people should be blurring. He should not be blurry. That's what happens when you don't have stabilization built into the lens or the body. A feature they did add to this camera, whoop-de-doo, is called step crop shooting. What that means is you can hit a button and from 35 you go to 50 millimeters, and you hit a button again, you go to 70 millimeters, but all of that is cropped. I turned it on to show you how it would work. Now, it's good for getting my composition better and getting rid of certain things, because 35 is not a it's a great lens. It's one of my favorite choices, 35, but not for reaching out and grabbing things at a distance. Keep in mind, if you're shooting JPEG, that's going to be baked into the JPEG when you go to 50 and 70, but if you shoot RAW, you can always hit reset and the crop will be gone and you'll have all of that data. Not a major feature worthy of $5,100. And like I said earlier, the quality of this camera is fantastic. Case in point, we have this kid here who was watching pre-game some of the pitchers and catchers warming up in the bullpen, and when he turned his head towards me, the IAF found exactly what it needed to find. The focus is great, the colors are beautiful, and the sharpness is spot on. That's what you would expect from, $5,100 camera, except for the fact that you can get a camera that's $3,000 and does the exact same thing, if not more. Once again, we know that the quality is going to be good. I got some very nice shots with this. I'm happy with those results, but that was expected because the a7CR exists and the a7R V exists, and it's the same innards and same sensor, so you know what you're going to get right there. Now, for those of you who are thinking about getting this and also want to shoot video, I'm not going to go deep into those video specs, but you can do 4K up to 30 frames per second, and there is a slight crop there. This is really meant to be shot in Super 35. The reason you can't do 4K 60 and they can't pump that up higher is this is a smaller body, which means you have less ability to dissipate the heat. And also, you don't have a headphone jack. Not that that's a deal breaker. You have microphone and your digital hot shoe, but this is, if you want to get video clips, you can do it, but this isn't the camera that it's really meant for. Hey there, would you like me to send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations? Just look for this orange box over on phronosphoto.com, put your name, email address in it, hit send it. I'm going to send you that guide for free, as well as add you to my email list where I give you updates and I do not spam you with BS. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, we already know that this is an expensive camera, but to add some accessories to the camera, it gets even more expensive, or as I like to say, expensive-ver, because that's not a word. But if you want to add a thumb grip to make this easier to hold, it's $300. You want to add a lens hood because it doesn't come with a lens hood, that's $200. And that is a disgrace. It should not be that expensive for those accessories. When you out Leica, you know you're in trouble. To wrap this up, this is a $5,100 point and shoot that you can't grow with, that you can't take with you when something happens to it, because everything is built in and locked into a box. It's $5,100. That might make sense if the a7CR didn't exist. But the a7CR exists, and I fully recommend not buying this camera and going with the a7CR. I don't think there is anybody that I would recommend this camera to, because this camera is far superior, not just because it's $3,000 at the time of recording this, but because you can choose any E-mount lens that you want to put onto it. You have image stabilization built in to the body. You can get image stabilized lenses. You can shoot at 8 frames per second. You can go up to 1/4000th of a second with the mechanical shutter at any aperture. You have a much better feeling body with a bigger grip, which means they have more space for that Z battery that you probably already have, and you get more power and don't have to charge as much. That's awesome. You have a flip out and rotatable screen. You have a nice EVF, which is the same one that you find in here, but all in all, that is a better choice for less money, and it's not much bigger or that much heavier. I can't see anybody buying this camera unless you're like, you know what? Money is no object. I don't care what you have to say. This is the camera that I want. But maybe the next 2 tests will skew your opinion, so let's start with the wind tunnel test. Will it pass? No. Fails the wind tunnel test. Sniff test. Let's see what it smells like. Overpriced. Smells like overpriced. Yeah, overpriced. Doesn't pass either of those tests. At the end of the day, what do you guys think? Would you buy this for $5,100, or are you gonna buy that camera with whatever lens that you want for far less? Let me know down below. And there you have it, Jared Polin from photo.com. See ya.